Hello, and welcome to the Lifestyle Herbalist Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to have a healthy dose of happiness. I'm your co-host, Dabney Vaccaro, clinical herbalist and health coach.
And I'm Sabrina Cooper, registered culinary holistic nutritionist and herbalist. Join us as we dive into the art of herbalism, mindfulness, and healthy lifestyle practices to help you achieve a happier and healthier life. Whether you're a seasoned herbalist or just starting your wellness journey, we're here to provide you with the insights, tips, and inspiration for a more balanced and joyful existence. So grab your favorite herbal tea, sit back, and let's get a healthy dose of happiness together. Hello and welcome everyone. Dabney and I are excited to have Dr. Hilary Claire with us on today's podcast. She is a clinical psychologist, holistic parenting mentor with a specialization in nutritional and environmental medicine, and is a mom of 2 boys. She is also the author of 3 books on overcoming motherhood burnout, postnatal depletion, and reclaiming vitality in motherhood. As well, she hosts the podcast Wild and Well, where she speaks with expert guests about health and well-being in motherhood. Hilary, we're so glad to have you here, and we're glad that you could come and join us and give us some insight on strategies for managing or addressing the picky eaters in our lives, as well as the well-being of mothers, because that's a very, very important topic. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I love your podcast, so it's great to be on it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love the name of your podcast, Wild and Well. It would certainly explain or describe my grand boys.
Yeah, it describes my kids too. They're well and they're wild. And yeah. I think I struggled to come up with a name at first because I didn't want to pigeonhole it too much, because I talk about so many different topics that all fit into supporting moms and their kids. So I figured that generally it's about being well and living a way that is slightly unconventional, which is the wild.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
Awesome. So on that topic, what inspired you to get into this whole business or this whole thought process of women and well-being, and how it led to you to picky eaters?
Yeah, it was definitely a journey. I started out always being really interested in health. I started studying to be a dietitian at university and then ended up switching to psychology and followed that. But throughout that process, I was working as a personal trainer and a group fitness instructor and a yoga teacher, and always learning about nutrition. And so always having that holistic lens, but having more of a focus in psychology. And then working with people, with kids and adults, parents, all sorts of different people. But once I became a mother, I started to realize that this was an area I really wanted to focus on, helping moms supporting moms, and then helping moms to support their kids in having optimal development. And that can look like a range of different things, whether it's supporting them to have great brain health and developmentally, everything working as well as it can, and also picky eating. I saw that there was such a need because picky eating is so common that I just got really fascinated with it when I was raising my kids, wanting to improve their microbiome right from the beginning and expose them to as many different vegetables as possible early on. And it just had me slowly move down this route that I never planned on being in, but I'm absolutely fascinated by it. And I find the combination of working with moms for moms and working with moms for their kids is a really nice blend, because it's hard to do one without the other. If we're working on supporting our kids, even when it comes to picky eating, mom's nervous system comes into it. Both parents' nervous systems do. I just generally work with mothers, and other aspects like their own behavior around food. So it's really hard to separate them. So it works out really well to work on both.
I think that you make a really great point that, we often work on our own selves, right? When we work on our microbiome and all that kind of thing, and the nerves that we have often affect us. But we don't stop to think that at a young age, this could be affecting kids, or what's going on with you is affecting them as well, and their eating habits, and a lot of the picky eating, or the way that they're not wanting to eat, or whatever it is, could be coming from something that happened in the day or something that they've absorbed from us or mothers, fathers, parents, whoever's caregiving. So I find it interesting. Like now that you said that, I just never put two and two together. Full disclosure, I don't have kids, so I don't see this every day. But when I see friends come in with their kids and visit, and I see their eating habits and things that are going on, and I look now that I look at their lifestyles, I think, oh, maybe that totally is making sense now.
Yeah, we impact each other, right? We live in the same household and our habits become our kids. And I don't want to say this to make moms feel guilty because we
Yeah.
all have an impact on our kids. Some of it's great, some of it is not the best, but it's not about like creating guilt or anything. It's just becoming aware of the impact that we do have and shifting that for our benefit and for our kids.
Yeah. I've noticed over the years, how parents will often make two dinners. They
Mhm.
make a dinner for their kids with chicken nuggets and French fries, and then they make a healthier meal for themselves because they think, or maybe there's the picky eater. So there's not, they don't get the vegetables, they don't get the rainbow, they don't get a chance to try because mom or whoever kind of caters because they just don't want another argument. They don't want another fit, and they just want ease and happiness in their household. And so they just give in. And it's so easy just to give in to that whiny kid who says, I don't like that. I want a macaroni and cheese and a hot dog.
Yeah, it is. And oftentimes, especially with like the world I work in, moms are so tired. They're so overwhelmed. They're so burnt out. They're so busy with work and parenting and all the things that modern day parents are faced with, that to have that argument with their child is just too hard. So often, yeah, that is really common that parents do have two different meals. It might be easier in the moment, but long term, it just sets you up for continuing to have to do that, which is really exhausting in itself, having to create two different meals. But it also doesn't allow your kids to have that exposure. And I think a lot of the time we assume that our kids aren't going to want something because maybe they didn't 10 or 20 times before. But it's really important to just keep offering it and normalize those foods as being something that you're going to just keep seeing over and over again. And maybe you're not going to eat it tonight, and maybe you're not going to eat it in a month, but eventually it's going to be part of what you eat.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember last year, we all, my whole family, all the grandkids and kids, we all went to dinner together. And I ordered some meal that had some sauteed broccoli in it. And at the time, the 2-year-old granddaughter, she said, "Oh, try that." So I was like, "Really?" And they were like, "Really?" And so anyway, she ate it. And so they started making her sauteed broccoli. But until that point, she had never wanted broccoli. But it was that pivotal moment when it was on Gigi's plate that it looked appetizing. I thought that was just so funny.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a really good strategy that you use there without even knowing it. It's having food on your plate and enjoying it and not necessarily even putting it on their plate, but they get curious, especially when they are quite a bit younger, like a 2-year-old that's perfect. They want whatever you're eating. They don't want their food. They want mom's food or grandma's food or someone else's food. So that's an excellent strategy that works really, really well. It's not as effective when kids are older, but it still does work. Like if you're just enjoying your food and you even tell them like, no, no, this is like, you can't have this. This is my food. They want it even more. So that
That's
can
great.
work really
Like
well.
make
Yeah,
it a game, like,
exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. They
Yeah.
don't realize it, but yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That brings me to the question of what parents can do to create a more positive mealtime experience and how we can make positive effects on our eating schedules and times and sitting together. What are some of the things I know, like, for example, I've done some workshops where we cook together and then the kids are a little more intrigued as to what they're actually eating because they've took the vegetables, they made a smoothie. Now they're like interested in, oh, what's it going to taste like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? You know, like they have all this different things going into their head. And then they realize that they actually like the smoothie or they liked the avocado in the smoothie, et cetera, without having to taste the actual avocado because they may not actually like the avocado. So, what are some of the things that you think can create a more positive food environment or mealtime for people when they do have a picky eater?
I think what you mentioned there is such a key one. It's getting the kids involved, and that can look like going to the farmer's market with them. It can look like gardening, meal prep, even them setting the table. Anything you can do to help them interact with the food before it's on their plate is so helpful. And I find like with my own kids and with clients that I work with, if you garden, let's say, they're much more likely to go out into the garden and eat something green, but they may not eat that green thing if you put it on their plate. So it's really helpful if you can include them in the meal prep or any aspect of food creation. That is so, so important. There's so many other things you can do. I mean, one big thing is often when you have a picky eater, meal times become really, really stressful. So moms and dads will notice that they're stressed going into it, having all these thoughts about, oh, like, how is it going to go tonight? Is it going to be another battle? So working on your nervous system ahead of time and your kids, because if you're going into those meals like that, your kids also are. They're going to feel your energy, but they also have gone through all those other meals before where it has been stressful and it hasn't been fun because mom and dad maybe are pressuring them to eat. So if you can do some things to help you regulate how you're feeling, and so you can sit down at that meal in a calmer state, you can make the meal more about connection than about what their child is or isn't eating. So some things to do. Singing is great. It helps to like tone your vagus nerve, humming, putting on music, dancing, like moving your body, having fun. Like maybe it's doing jumping jacks or maybe it's playing a game and chasing your kid around the house. Whatever it is to like connect you, to help calm yourself and to do the same for your child is so key before a meal, especially if you have been in that cycle of meals being stressful. Other things you can do is model healthy eating. So, eating the rainbow yourself, eating real food rather than the ultra processed foods. That can be so helpful because what you do, especially when your kids are young, is how your kids understand the world because they're not necessarily exposed to that many other perspectives. Like what their parents do is what people do. So if you eat real food and you have a healthy relationship with food and you show that to your kids through your behavior, that eventually becomes their norm as well. Making those meal times just about, I briefly mentioned this, but making them about connection. So focusing on the relationship and focusing on like what you did that day and having conversations. Some people even play games during meals. This can be really helpful to just make mealtime like an amazing experience that takes down the pressure about what the kid is eating or isn't eating. Not that we don't want to try to motivate our kids to eat the foods that we provide, but that only happens from a safe place. So if our kids are stressed, that immediately shuts off their appetite, the saliva in their mouth, their digestion, all that stops, and they don't want to eat. But if we can make it a safe, fun, connecting place at the table, they're ready. Their bodies are calm. They're in that rest and digest state. So they're more likely to be open to what you put on their plate. There's some practical things you can do, like family style meals are great. So if you just put everything on the table and people get to put what they want on their plate, that's another way of involving kids in the meal experience rather than putting all this broccoli on their plate and saying you have to eat this. They get to choose how much they put on their plate. So they have that ownership. They're more likely to try it. That can be helpful. If it is a meal that parents are serving, putting a tiny amount of the food that they don't like on their plate is great. So if they hate peas, maybe put 2 peas on rather than like 20. So if they eat one, they've already eaten half of the amount. Like that's a win for them. They feel like, oh, maybe I am somebody
Right.
who eats peas. But if they only eat one and there's 20 on their plate, well, they're going to feel like, okay, my identity is not somebody who likes peas or somebody who eats them. So if you can start building up their identity in little ways like that, that can be helpful too. I could go on and on and on, but those are a few strategies.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I
You
love
do
that.
have that. I do have an ebook out. So if people are interested, they can always go to your website. There's like a lot of things that you offer in terms of helping, moms, parents, people in order to address picky eaters. So that's also an option if we don't cover everything here today, because we only have a short time. And so, that's amazing that you have that. And I do think that what you're saying about making it a safe space is so important because even tone of voice can like really deter kids. Like if you're like, sit down, eat your meal, like sit, why are you running around? Blah, blah, and then it just causes stress for even guests at the table, right? And again, I just talk as a guest at the table of friends, but the child will get up out from the table, start running around. The food's sitting there, we're trying to eat. It's like now it's all chaos. They're yelling, they're screaming, kids not coming. Like it's not enjoyable. So I think that if we all just kind of, like you said, played a game maybe while they were eating, like make a game out of eating, it would probably be a lot easier because obviously the attention span of the conversation we're having as adults is not resonating with this poor child. So obviously it's not fun. And so involving him or her is going to be a lot easier and make it more enjoyable. And they'll probably eat more in a given time, right? Instead of getting
Yeah.
up from the table and running around. So,
Yeah, you bring up the point of guests at the table. Something that a dietitian friend of mine told me like years ago was treat your kid like they are a guest at the table. And can you imagine if you were at your friend's place and they were yelling at you like, "Why aren't you eating your broccoli, Sabrina?" Like it'd be ridiculous. And like, why can't we treat our
right.
kids the same way that we would treat other people at our table? We're going to eat at the same time as them. We're going to serve the same foods that we're going to eat. We're going to have conversations about whatever it is that we want to talk about, right? We're not going to be just like focused on their plate the whole time.
Yeah,
Like that'd be really weird if that was
it would,
another adult.
it
So
would be
let's think
really
about
weird.
that when we are sitting down with our kids.
However,
You
it
know,
does
the other,
happen.
yeah.
Does it?
It does happen to me, and it has happened to me where I've eaten, people don't, I think, expect that I eat, and then when all of a sudden you eat something, they're like, "Wow, you were hungry," and you're like, "Were you watching me eat this whole time?" I'm like you said, then I feel like it's like body shaming or something. I'm like, so I get like the whole child being like a little bug on a like, in a microscope, a petri dish, everybody watching that child. Like it's always like, what is she gonna eat? Is she eating that? Oh my God, she's eating that. You know what I mean?
It's
It's
a lot
very
of pressure,
interesting. It's a
right?
lot of pressure, and then it's causing stress on my digestive system. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I just won't eat that anymore, because
Hmm.
it makes you feel uncomfortable. So I get it. I mean, it's yeah, doesn't happen a lot, but there are sometimes that it happens. So anyway, Dabney, you were gonna say.
Well, I was just thinking that unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of fractured families who don't sit down together for dinner. And kids eat at the bar, and then parents stand later and eat whatever. And so I've noticed there just seems to be a lack of families sitting down together having a meal. And I love that you are emphasizing the importance of that because as parents, we are modeling behaviors. And so, Sabrina, when you're talking about kids running all over the place, well, they probably haven't been taught or conditioned that you sit down at the table. How many kids eat something and go run and play, come back later, eat something, and they're just kind of picking at their food and they don't even sit down to eat a meal. They're just kind of picking at their food and going to go watch TV, or they're going to pick at their meal and go play with their truck some more. And so there's not this holistic, loving, family style place to actually practice all the things that we should be doing.
Yeah, and you miss out on so much. They don't have the modeling because they don't see what the parents are eating. And mealtime is so much more than about the food.
Right.
It's such an
It's a
important part of,
connection.
yeah, it's a connection. And it's something that you want to continue. Like I still love having meals with my family outside of like my kids and my husband. It's such a special connecting time. And you start that right from the beginning. And it's hard when they're babies and maybe it only lasts a few minutes, but over time they can stay at the table longer. And I think it's a really important thing that we need to bring back for our kids' mental health, for their eating, for so many aspects of their health. We need to bring back sitting at the table. And that doesn't mean that we have to do 3 meals a day. I understand that that's like not realistic, but just adding one more to your week is an amazing start.
Yeah. I remember my daughter, she was probably about 16 years old. She had her driver's license and she was, into her friends and hanging out with her friends. And I remember her coming home one day and saying, Mom, I just want to say thanks for making us dinner every night. I was like, yeah, you're welcome. What brought that on? She says, well, when I go to my friend's house, like they don't sit down for meals. Like they kind of just look in the refrigerator, warm up something, go to their room and eat. And they don't sit down as a family and like hang out and talk. And I just really appreciate that about growing up in that way that we've been able to do that. So it really struck a chord with me and how important mealtime is. And we just continue that on. We used to practice on Sunday. I would get out the china and we would practice, this is fine dining. This is where you put your napkin in your lap. We would practice those things. We would have a white tablecloth and we would just make it fun. And they always look forward to Sunday dinners.
Yeah, that's such a nice ritual that your kids will remember and will likely do with their kids as well.
Yeah,
And now
I
you'll
don't
carry it
know.
on with your grandkids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Get out the
for
nice
sure.
china when they come over.
That's right. Well, maybe when
I
they
may
get
not.
paid,
I don't
it's
know.
not like clearing the table with
Maybe
their hand.
nicer plates. I'm just kidding.
In
Right.
time, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the potential long-term effects? Like if you have a picky eater, I know it's very stressful for parents. I know there are people or children who, I don't know how it begins or I don't know anything about that. But all of a sudden they want specific vegetables cut a specific way or a specific, we were talking about this the other day, specific type of meat or a specific something and they won't budge. It has to be that. Now, how can we get parents or kids and then parents and children to shift so that they will be able to eventually eat different things in different ways and it will be less stressful and won't have negative impacts as they grow? Or do they grow out of it, I guess?
Some kids grow out of it. So around the age of 3, it's really evolutionarily normal for kids to become more picky around that age. So I think it's really important at that age as parents to know that, but also to keep serving foods because sometimes at 3, kids stop eating so many things that they were eating before, and then parents stop serving those. So then that can maintain the pickiness. But so there are a lot of kids that do grow out of it if parents do keep serving it and having meals and doing all the things. The issue is also there can be a lot of underlying problems that can cause picky eating. And if we don't address those when our kids are younger, that can then keep the picky eating going and can lead to like, other issues. So a few of these are nutritional deficiencies. So if our kids are low in zinc and a few other vitamins, but zinc is the main one, that's going to more likely make them picky. So it's going to decrease their appetite. They're not going to experience food and the taste and the texture of food in the same way. So food doesn't appeal to them as much. If you don't address that, that's going to stay there. It's probably going to get worse because if they're low in zinc, then they're not going to eat as much, and then they're going to get lower in that nutrients, and that can create a problem, not only for eating, but then for all the important things that zinc and other nutrients help our bodies and our brains with, like our immune system and our development, all the things. Other underlying issues that if you don't look at will keep picky eating there are if kids have tongue ties or really small underdeveloped jaws, they may not learn how to chew or they may not be able to chew and swallow properly. So that's going to maintain that issue and probably lead to more and more restriction as kids get older. If they have gut issues, like they have a dysbiosis in their microbiome, that can really lead to picky eating. If they have other gut issues, that can lead to like discomfort in their bellies, so they're less likely to eat. And then that continually leads to more and more restriction in what they eat. And they're more likely to want to eat like sweet and ultra processed foods if they have a microbiome that is kind of out of whack. And that, again, if you don't address it, is just going to keep happening. They're going to keep only wanting those foods. And that's going to lead to, like, as you guys know, so many different like immune issues and health issues down the road. Other things that really can keep kids picky are unintegrated primitive reflexes. So if people aren't aware of what primitive reflexes are, they're these reflexes that we have like in utero and in early childhood, or more in infancy where they help us like get through the birth canal and learn certain movements, and they're there for survival. But if we don't move our bodies enough, we may never lose them, and that can keep us from, it's really strange, but it is actually connected to picky eating in so many ways. So if we have, say, a moro reflex that we've kept, and that one keeps you in like that fight or flight mode, you're not going to be digesting. You're not going to have an appetite. So you're going to more likely be picky. There's a number of other reflexes there that really are associated with picky eating. But these, if we don't look at those and address them, the picky eating continues. But this can also lead to behaviors like ADHD, learning difficulties, like challenges with reading, with regulating our emotions. So if we don't address the reasons for picky eating, those are just a number of them. But if we don't address them and look at like what is it for my child, it can keep going and they can keep being picky. But it can also lead to a host of other problems that are going to have the kids struggling potentially for the rest of their lives. There's a lot of adults that if they could have integrated some of their reflexes, they'd be able to read and they would have done well at school. Like there's a lot of repercussions for these things if we don't look at them. And I think a lot of the time people don't connect those to picky eating, but it's picky eating is connected to like full development of the child. So I don't know if that quite answered your question, but
No,
I think it's a very
100%.
important point.
100%. I think we dismiss the fact, like I said before, I think we dismiss that these little people or little humans are just mini versions of us get as older people, right? So their issues that they may be experiencing could be stemming from something else. And oftentimes we dismiss them. It seems like we dismiss them and just say, oh, they'll grow out of it. Or, oh, this is probably just normal behavior. Or, they like sugar. What can I do? They're addicted to it. Yeah, but there's a reason. It doesn't just happen, right? So I think that sometimes these things get dismissed and parents or caregivers should take a deeper look at these things if there are issues like picky eating and other things, learning, et cetera, because it could, like you said, be stemming from something else and we just disregard it at times. So you did answer the question.
Yeah, and I think it is like with picky eating, it's just so common that people see it as normal. But I don't think it is necessarily normal. It's a red flag to tell you that there's some challenge that this kid is going through. And maybe it is one of those ones that I listed, or maybe it is that they're just given too much ultra processed food. So that's what they're going to start craving, and that's what their microbiome is going to be asking them for.
Yeah, it's so true that our microbiome speaks to us through that nerve and cravings, and I mean the bad bacteria, they need to be fed, and oftentimes they're the loudest voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. And they generally ask for the sweet things, the starchy things, the
Oh,
processed
sure.
things,
That's
not
what
the things
that's
that
a
have
grow.
nutrients. Yeah.
Right. Well, because the good guys want the prebiotics, the fiber, they want all of those things. And yeah, typically there's that dysbiosis. But I never thought about it being with the kiddos, but that makes total sense. If they're not eating well from the get-go, yeah, they're going to get a dysbiosis and that's going to lead to those cravings. And in the dental world, we have kids who come in with cavities and mom's in the corner and say, yeah, yeah, I can't keep her out of the candy drawer. I'm thinking, well, she doesn't go to the store and buy the candy.
Yeah. Right.
If it's not in the house, but again, it's that modeling. If mom's got her hand in the candy drawer, well, Susie Q wants to be in the candy drawer too. It tastes good and it's addicting and, makes her feel great.
Yeah. A rule that like I didn't make up, but Ellen Satter, who works in this space, came up with quite a while ago is knowing what your role is as a parent and what your child's role is. They're not going to the shops and buying the candy, like you say.
Great.
We as the parent have the responsibility to choose what our kids eat and when they eat. And our kids get to choose how much of it that they eat. So I don't think it should be the child's choice to pick the candy necessarily. That is the adult's responsibility. Like if it comes to sleep, let's say, I like to use that as an example. You don't just let your kid go to bed like whenever they want. You pick a time and you generally help them get to bed at that time. They don't stay up till 2 in the morning because they just felt like it. if they're like 3 years old, you make sure they're in bed by 7 or 8. With food, it should be no different. We have to create boundaries as parents. That is part of our responsibility.
Yeah.
I think there's such a gray area now from being a parent, a friend, like there's this big area where like it's kind of parents are going into that wanting to be the friend and not disappoint or feel the guilt of being a bad parent, whatever it is. And so that's hard for them to navigate. And I think they cross that border or that boundary a lot where they're just like, I just want my child to be happy. I don't want to feel, or maybe they went through something when they were an adult. I'm not downplaying it. It's just that nowadays I just find that our generation, it just seems like there's this gap that's closing between parents and it's like, well, they're just a child, or that doesn't happen, or manners, or whatever it is. It just seems like, oh, well, this is the new way. This is the way things are, and and I'm like, but who's creating this? Like, there's a boundary that's been let go. Like, there's been something that we've lost along the way that we're creating, right? So I
Yeah.
think the same thing goes with the and again, I think it sometimes is like maybe it is losing touch, maybe it's busy lives, and I feel like we still have control of that ourselves. Like you said, we have to take time to like decompress before we go into a meal. And I think sometimes parents take like the time to eat at a table together to have their own time, and then don't realize it's a family time too, and that can also be a problem. So that becomes like, where you say let's just be friend, like it should be friendly, right? But anyway, I'm kind of went off on a tangent, but my point is that there's like the boundaries are being kind of the gray area where there's a parent, a child, and now it's like, how do you navigate that without feeling guilty that you're you know
Yeah.
not
I think it's such an important point. In past generations, parents were maybe a bit too strict with things and not giving children a voice to articulate like their needs and their thoughts on things. So this generation has now swung so far the other way that a lot of parents are scared to say no and they want to give their children choice in everything, and not just choice but like making the big decisions, and that is just overwhelming for a child's brain, and it's not teaching them to be more independent or to make better choices for themselves. It's actually doing the opposite, and kids who are given too much of that choice down the track become more anxious because they didn't have boundaries. And boundaries are so important. They contain you so you can do what you want within those, but you know when you've stepped outside and when you haven't. And we need that,
Right.
especially as children when our brains are very, I don't want to say underdeveloped, but they're not yet developed fully. They don't have that frontal lobe. Like we are their frontal lobe as parents
Mm.
up until the age that they're like, I guess out of
25.
the house, but 25,
Yeah,
right? Like,
25.
yeah.
Hmm.
So they need us to be that frontal lobe that plans, makes like decisions that think about the long term. And if we don't have boundaries, we're putting too much pressure on our kids.
Well, and it's safe. Boundaries are safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have keywords because sometimes if my daughter is playing with a friend, let's say at the playground, and she says, "Oh, hey, why don't you come over and spend the night?" She's like, "Okay." My daughter would come over with the friend, and we would have these words like how she would ask it would be whether she wanted to or not, because she didn't want to say, "No, I don't want to," but it would be me being the bad guy. It's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. No, we have plans tonight, maybe another time." Because there were times that I was like, well, I can think about it. Sure, that's fine. But then I found out my daughter didn't want to go. So then we had to come up with keywords so that I would know whether it would be okay or like, no, she doesn't really want to go.
yeah.
So those boundaries, it's important to have those boundaries to be safe.
Yeah, it's so important. And in that situation, that's too much on a child to have to say to the friend, "No, I don't feel comfortable
Right.
coming to your house. I feel anxious and scared, so I don't want to go." It's so much easier and more appropriate for the parent to be that role. And then the kids can maintain their friendship. And it's about, oh, the tough parent is the one that's doing this. Parents sometimes have to be the bad guy. And I think our generation, we want
Doesn't
to
want to be.
we want to be the
And it's
friend,
it's not a
right?
popularity contest.
It's
I'm not
not.
interested in being popular with my kids. My goal is to make them productive members of society. That's
Yeah.
that's the goal It's not about being popular, and I know they didn't always like me, and that's okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I think just with human nature, we swing so far from one extent, like one extreme to the other. So I think parents are going to start shifting back to a middle ground between being like too strict and being too lenient. A happy medium in the middle is ideal. So
Mhm.
hopefully that is going to start shifting when it comes to eating or any other aspect of boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I know my daughters, and we now have more information at our fingertips. Whereas when I was raising kids, like I felt like I was on an island. There wasn't podcasts. We didn't have cell phones. I mean, the information just wasn't there necessarily. And so now we have so much more information that we can attune to and learn from, and just groups of people who are coming together so that we can learn more how to be better parents, for our kiddos.
Mhm. And that's great. And it's also overwhelming and can bring
Yes.
on a lot of guilt because you think like, oh, I did this one thing wrong. I'm an awful parent. Like we don't have to get it right. We only have to, make sure our kids know that they are safe and loved. And if we're doing that, like we're doing okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That being said, like this kind of goes in a direction of generational and times changing. But back in the day, there were like, maybe not as many cultural differences. So do you find now children like, with cultural differences in school, does that play a big role in picky eating at certain ages where children might be like, oh, I don't want that. Or maybe does it work the other way where they're like, oh, so and so brought this to school and I thought it was pretty cool. Can we try it? Like, are there have you seen that being, with having boys and children? Either of you? I don't know. It could be a question for either of you.
Yeah, I find that the moms that I have been working with have younger kids, so they're less like the kids are less aware of what other kids are eating. But it definitely is starting to, like with my own kids, I'm starting to notice that. But unfortunately, most of it is that they're just more and more exposed to ultra processed foods rather than like exciting other cultural
Ethnic
foods.
foods,
I
yeah.
think we have to seek that out ourselves personally and go to like different restaurants and hang out with friends who like eat in different ways. But yeah, through school and social events and sports, my kids and a lot of like clients that I work with, their kids too, it just seems like they're more likely exposed to the ultra processed stuff and having to navigate that.
Yeah.
Because it packs really easily.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered because I mean, being well in Toronto area, I know that like when have seen families, children, or friends' children grow up, there's a lot of ethnicity there. So some of them were more exposed to like, let's say, sushi and things like that because some of these kids would bring that to school. Where when I grew up, there wasn't such a thing. There wasn't that. It was more of a stigma. I mean, my mom was Mexican. I was probably one of the most ethnic. There was maybe an Asian, Chinese, and one other child that was of ethnicity. And so if I brought a quesadilla to school, they were like, what is that? And what is your lunch? Why is it not a sandwich? Like it was just such a cultural different thing that I just wondered. And for me growing up, it was kind of like my mom would never give me like a peanut butter sandwich because she thought it was like the most disgusting thing ever. So, or like, I don't know. I just, even for me, sandwiches, I was like, you put meat in two pieces of bread and then you take it to school and it sits in your lunchbox all day. That's kind of gross. So that made me a picky eater because I just thought it was like the most, maybe it was an OCD thing. My parents probably should have looked at it when I was younger because I was just thought it was the most absurd thing, that like you would put things in a lunchbox and leave it there in the warmth for like 3 hours and then eat your lunch. I didn't get that. So my mom would bring me lunch every day because or they'd put like a thermos of soup or something because I just really didn't like that. So I don't know. I just figured maybe it's something that is changing over time in a positive. It could be positive because not everything has to be negative about, eating and picky eating, right? It could
Yeah.
transform into something more positive. But
Yeah, and I think kids are a lot more open and like aware of a diversity of foods now compared to like when you were growing up, when I was growing up. But school lunches and yeah, when kids are together, it just generally seems like not the most helpful foods are brought out.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
that's unfortunate. So even picky eaters, are there things that we can tell parents? Because I think taking like school lunches is one of the bigger things. Maybe at home it's a little more monitored, but sending a child to school with a lunch is probably a really tough one with picky eaters, I would think, right? It's more,
I think it's hard even if you don't have picky eaters because like you say, you pack something and then it sits there all day. So nothing in a lunch is appetizing. Like I'll make food, even if like we make pizza the night before and the kids love it. The next day if I pack it in their lunch, like my kids might not even eat it because it's just like it's unappealing because it's been sitting there. So it would be great if schools would do like warm lunches or yeah, parents should be bringing lunches at lunchtime. That would be amazing. Packing soups and thermoses. I love all those ideas. But specifically for picky eaters with lunches, I think with any meal, but I guess lunches, especially because you want your kid to eat something during the day, make sure that you put something in there that you know your kid likes and that they will eat because they do need to have like calories and the sugars and the nutrients in their body like to help
to
their
learn
brain work.
everything.
Yeah. So talking to your kid and just knowing like what they generally like and trying things out. And if you notice that they consistently eat their banana, like keep adding the banana so they at least have that one thing that they eat. And then you can add some other things that you're not sure if they're going to eat, but at least they have something. And I find it really helpful when it comes to like meals or lunches having a culture in your family that we try the food. So one of my kids will eat everything on his plate, everything in his lunch. The other one's a little bit trickier. And his little peppers kept coming home every day. And the meat that I packed would come home every day in his lunch. And I just told him, I reminded him, in our family, we try everything. So just have a bite. You don't have to eat the whole pepper. You don't have to eat the whole thing of meat, but have a bite because you might not think that you like it, but in time you might realize you like it. You might not, but we try things. So we use that at dinner and also in lunches. So then at least at school he is eating a little bit more. So I find that if you can change that mindset, that and make that just this is just what we do. It's not like a positive or a negative, or you're not like yelling or all amped up about it. It's just neutral. We try it.
Yeah,
Love it.
my daughter, when I went to school, it was just like a lunchbox. You had a thermos or whatever for your drink. Usually a sandwich, some chips, a cookie, like it was pretty basic. But now they have these things called bento boxes, which are just so cool. So my daughter packs like hummus and carrots and celery um, for my son. And even she had to do this even for daycare because they didn't provide food. So she's been doing this for ever since they've been going to daycare. And they could eat solid foods, but then like strawberries and blueberries and just putting all those rainbows of things in their little bento box. But it actually has like a little like ice or whatever that you can keep it cold. You can put like
Hmm.
a little thing of meat in there. So, you know, things have come they're a long way. But it's now what about the bento box is that it's just little things. Like I'm sure when he's in middle school, he's probably not going to take a bento box. It's probably going to be much bigger selection. But in that little box, it's just a little bit of everything that she decides. And he loves nuts and things. So he gets a good variety of choices.
And that's a nice way to add those little bits so they don't feel overwhelmed by have to eat. Like, what if they don't like the sandwich and that's the only thing in there? They can
Right,
at least eat like the
right,
strawberries or the nuts. So it
right.
is nice. It is funny though. Like my husband always jokes that I'm like making this like 9 course meal because of bento boxes. That you're like, why am I adding so many things? Like lunches used to be so much more simple.
Sandwich, I guess.
But
They take a
even
lot of time.
yeah, I even think even like giving the child who's picky, like, hey, help me make your lunch for tomorrow.
Totally.
Give them ownership. Well, hey, this came home today. You put that in there. Like, what happened? And it
Yeah.
becomes something that they chose to put in their lunch besides the parent. Anyway.
Yeah, the more that you can get them involved in their food and having ownership over it, like choosing that food and putting it in, the easier it is that they're going to be eating it and continue eating it.
Yeah. It's so funny too, because I have chickens and my 5-year-old grandson loves to go and collect the eggs. He won't eat eggs unless he collects them. Like when he's at Gigi's house and he collects the eggs, like he wants to put it in a frying pan, he wants to eat it. But at home, he will not eat eggs. but he has ownership in collecting that egg. He saw where it comes from, and he's interested now in eating the egg. I thought
Yeah,
that
that's a
was so
perfect
interesting.
example of that. And in time, he may be more open to eating eggs like at a restaurant and in different settings too, because he has like so many experiences with eggs that he might be open to it. Or maybe he's just like really understands quality of food and he only wants to eat those fresh
At a
eggs,
young age. He's
It
like,
which
it
isn't a
these
bad
does
thing.
other eggs
it
are
does taste
garbage.
better. It does taste better for
It
sure.
does.
So Dr. Claire, is there any other research that you're looking into for picky eating or any topics that you're excited to learn more about? I know you've written a few books if you want to touch about those, more about women's wellness. And I know there's an ebook for picky eating, but three actual books, right? I think.
Yeah, I wrote three books for mothers who are struggling with like postnatal depletion and feeling burnt out in the early months and years, even decades of motherhood. And then I have my ebook on picky eating, and I'm also working on a like full book on picky eating. So the ebook is just it covers a number of different points, some really good starting points, addressing some of the root causes and what we can do to start making progress with those. But when the book is out, it's going to cover a lot more. It's like going to be bite-sized strategies for helping parents who have picky eaters. I think at this point there's like 88 different strategies so parents can just like open it up and think, okay, I can work on gut health today. I feel like that's doable, or maybe not. Maybe I want to look at like how I can make mealtime more enjoyable. Whatever it is, they can go and pick what they need to work on, but
Work
also
on.
what they feel like they can work on. I think it's important to look at both. But in terms of other things that I'm researching, always learning. I could
Awesome.
learn for the rest of my life. And I guess we do, but I just love it. Like I love researching and then bringing that information to other people. So there will be books on anxiety and emotional regulation for kids and their parents in the future. Those are topics that like I work with clients on. But yeah, always learning and researching.
I
I
don't
think
know
it's
whether this pun was intended, but you said I have some little bite-sized pieces in there for picky eaters.
I know that was a good one. It's perfect. Perfect.
That's cute.
But I'm glad that you're writing a book on picky eating because I don't think that there's much out there for women. Because even someone had said to me, you should do a course on picky eating, one of my friends. And I said, I don't have a clue. Like I do, but I don't because I don't have someone to test it on. I don't really know. Like I just assume, kids, yeah, until my friends' kids come over and then I'm like, oh, here's this. And they're like, that's not the right ketchup. I'm like, it's ketchup. It looks like it's natural. They're like, it's not the right one. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, did you bring ketchup? I'm like, do I have to go buy them ketchup? I'm like, what's wrong with, so it's just interesting because even though you're in nutrition and holistic nutrition, all these things, sometimes it's hard for us to actually navigate what's working and what's not in the situation, right? And so since you have hands on, I think it's really great and you have your background, it's fantastic. So I know a lot of people who will be definitely interested in your book.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And just on that ketchup topic, a good strategy there, not necessarily like for you, like don't do this for when kids come over, but as parents, if you want to transition, say your ketchup from one that is like really processed and high in sugar to one that is made with more real ingredients, just use that same bottle and start adding in over time, small amounts, and then increase more. It it works. I've seen it work for so many children. They just don't know. And eventually their taste buds get used to the more natural one. And then they're more open to seeing that come from that bottle. But it can be a slow transition for some children.
Sometimes perception, I guess, is really what it is. Like if you put like some organic cereal into a box that looks exactly the same, sort of similar, they probably wouldn't really much notice. I mean, they might, but with the milk and whatever else they're eating, they might not, or like you said, do it little bits at a time. So it's just changing their taste buds, and that makes a lot of sense. And I also like the fact that you used tea, herbal tea, to make gummies. I thought that was a great idea when I saw that. I thought that was fantastic. So, also a great option for parents to get in, especially now cold season, getting some like herbal tea blends in there and making them enjoy their fun gummies.
Yeah, my kids I use a lot of your teas, and they often have a few sips. And yeah, we make gummies with them. It's great. It's such a nice way. Tea is an excellent way for them to get different flavors to get used to, as well as like different medicinal qualities of the herbs in there. So they're just getting more and more exposed to other tastes and other foods. So I love teas as that. And one of my kids is very like open. He wants to have tea. He's obsessed. The other one just wants plain water. But sometimes I just say, sorry, I don't have any water. This is what I have. So if you want some, have the tea, because I don't want to like get up and go and get water and everything. And it's just nice for him to almost not be forced, but have a bit more incentive to try it. And he's getting more and more used to it because I'm just offering it over time. I'm not seeing it that, okay, you didn't like it once, like we're never going to try it. No, you have to keep offering it. And he's loving the teas now.
Oh,
Oh,
great.
that's amazing.
Hmm.
So helpful. So many takeaways today, so many things, so much learning that we had. And I'm sure our audience will definitely love hearing all about you. And we'll have all your information up on our with the podcast, and but you can
Show
let people
notes.
know where they can find you if you'd like, and then you can give them maybe one more takeaway, just something that you think will be the most helpful thing for that very picky eater.
So on Instagram and Facebook, I'm Dr. Hilary Claire. So doctor is just DR. And then my website's the same, drhilaryclaire.com. My podcast, like you mentioned before, is Wild and Well. You can find that on Spotify and Apple. And a take home message is just if you don't know where to start with what feels doable and go with that. And if you really don't know where to start, just work on the relationship that you have with your kid and create that safety and that love and that connection and focus on that and always come back to that. And all the other strategies in parenting and picky eating will be easier.
Thank you. That's great.
Hilary, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. As always, very informative. Learned so much from you, and I'm sure our listeners will gain so much knowledge and information about how they can manage their picky eaters. And if you know anyone else who would love to hear this or could get something out of this podcast, please share away, and also look into Dr. Hilary Claire's website and Instagram, which we will have posted in our show notes. Thank you for listening in to this wonderful conversation we had today. And hopefully you'll tune in to the rest of our podcast and stay tuned for more on the way. Until next time.